in the same way that you can be a football fan without literally playing football, you can be a Touhou fan without playing the games. Like, it's not that deep. If you like any part of Touhou, you're a fan of it. No, thank you. Yeah, I just find it weird because it's like, it seems like everything else on that article is about, like, objective things, and that's just, oh, this song is about this because this random guy on YouTube said so.
I mean, hey, if you're gonna throw out something that's subjective, you might as well cite a source.
I guess that's fair.
In the EnglishTouhouWiki.net, it has its own problems. A lot of the things it's really good at is the same thing that Wikipedia is really good at, in that a lot of times it'll say something that you're like, that doesn't really sound right. But it has a link to where you can go to the source material, and then you're like, oh, okay, that is right, or that is not right.
And then Osana Reimu was kind of the point where I'm like, oh, so this is why everyone loves Touhou.
Hello and welcome to the second issue of the Hifuu Community Club. On this show, we bring on the talented minds and hands of the Touhou community to talk about some of their greatest works. Joining us for this issue is a YouTube video essayist and official Wikipedia-cited source, Megapig9001. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself and your creative outlets?
Yeah. Hello. I'm Megapig9001. I make Touhou video essays, Touhou fan games. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of it.
All right, great. So, I think what you're predominantly known for on the internet is your YouTube video essays. You've been making YouTube videos for several years now, but it seems like you really started to find your style in the last year and a half or so. It seems that you started your video essay format in around 2019 with a video titled Time Skips in Fire Emblem Games, in which you go through a list of the games in the Fire Emblem franchise and review their use of the time skip trope. What gave you the idea to start this sort of analytical content?
I think it's a bit of, like, an unusual answer, but actually, it's mainly high school English class, because, like, I love writing, and throughout high school, I had, like, a lot of really good English teachers. So from that experience, it was like, I want to do writing, but then I also want to talk about things I like, so that led me to talk about, video games, because I'd also seen other video essayists, and at the time, which was 2019, Fire Emblem was my favorite video game series. So, yeah, I wrote a script, recorded something, and that's what it ended up with. Yeah, I'd say the big thing with that video is, I think the script is good, it's just that I don't really have any gameplay footage to go with it, because I didn't, like, have the technology at the time. And, yeah, that's what I'd say distinguishes that video from my later ones, which is when I think my channel started taking off.
Right, yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense to say that you got into that because of having good English teachers. I was sort of the same way getting into videos of explaining Touhou lore, because I took composition courses in college, and I failed college quite spectacularly. Yeah, I had some really great teachers in high school and university teaching composition. That was what I enjoyed the most, that's what I did the best in, so I wanted to see if I could translate that sort of analytical process into Touhou of, hey, here I'm gonna, go through the process of getting all these sources, packing them down, summarizing them, writing an essay about them. So I can definitely understand getting into that from the education side of things. So the second video essay that you produced, it seems to be what your introduction to Touhou video essays was. It's a video titled How Touhou's Game Design Evolved with Windows. How was this video received when it first came out, and what are some of your hindsight thoughts on the video?
Yeah, so that was the first video that I feel like I put a lot of effort not into just writing, but also editing. So with that video, it came about because I was playing through the PC98 games for the first time, and then after playing Touhou 6, I noticed just some small things that I thought were neat, and then I looked online and no one had really said them, so I decided to make them into a video. Yeah, so then the general reception, that was what inspired me to keep going, because for the first time, I made a video that didn't involve my, like, big Mario fan game that was able to get over 100 views despite my audience not being geared to Touhou. I even got, like, a nice commenter who really liked it, who'd never seen any of my other videos. So, yeah, from there, I was inspired to keep making videos.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you get some of those commenters that are like, I've never seen your stuff before, but, this is really nice. I got into it because of this. It's interesting to see sort of how the YouTube metadata will sometimes pick videos out of the infinite sea of content and just push them into people's recommended, and it's bizarre. It's a black box, and it's fascinating. But yeah, it's interesting to hear that you're even able to find something that hasn't been said about Touhou 6. I mean, you could just as easily say the old aphorism of what hasn't been said about Touhou 6, but in truth, there are still lots of things. People have data mined the game, front to back. They dig so deep into the files and the old screenshots and the old dead links on the website. Sometimes they just miss what's in the game itself, how the audio design makes a huge difference in giving players feedback as to what their character is doing, what they need to be doing. Audio feedback in audio design is a huge part of that video essay that I feel like you touched on. And like you said, not a lot of other people at the time were talking about it, so it was very interesting to see that. Now, your most viewed video by a significant margin is the history of Bad Apple. It's not something I would have expected to see on YouTube. It's another one of those video ideas that you had that just seemed like no one else was talking about. It's a really fascinating and well put together video. What gave you the idea to make an essay about Bad Apple, such a specific topic?
Okay, so I think it was 2020. So, like, around that time, it was Richard B, who's a metal coverist, released a version of Bad Apple that was a cover of the Japanese version, except it had the singer of the English version, Christina V, who has the most famous English cover, and then the music video was, like, modeled after the original Bad Apple shadow art, so it was Christina V, like, in live action reenacting the shadows, and I thought, whoa, that was really cool, and that kind of got me on a Bad Apple kick again, because I think I discovered Bad Apple, like, a year and a half before, so then I knew a few things, but after that, like, I started watching a ton of, like, Bad Apple videos, like, all the demo stuff, all the remixes, and from there, I was able to learn more things, like, oh, Bad Apple was originally a storyboard, and then someone brought it to life with the shadows, or this is in black and white because it matches the lyrics of the song. It was kind of like a bunch of things people had said around the internet, but never put together in one place. And I knew Bad Apple was popular, so I was like, if there's one video that has a chance of, like, getting big, it would probably be a video about Bad Apple. So I spent, like, a vacation writing the script, I think, so that was probably a week. And then I spent, like, another week editing it, and initially it actually was probably the least successful of all my Touhou videos, but unlike the other ones, it just steadily kept getting views. Like, I get, like, 2 views a day, and then it kept growing and growing, and eventually, yeah, it reached 1,000 views, and after that, it just completely took off. I don't know if, like, 1,000 views is, like, a golden number for YouTube or something, but yeah, it felt pretty good, but that was, I think, December, which was about 4 months after I originally uploaded the video.
And I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head with figuring out what would be a balance between a really interesting video and also a very successful video, being that, like you said, Bad Apple is extremely popular, arguably one of the most, if not the most, well-known fan remix in Touhou, perhaps maybe on the same level of some of Beat Mario's remixes. And that's what originally drew me to your channel. That was the first video of yours that was recommended to me, and that's how I found your channel. So it definitely speaks to how far-reaching this video has been, that It has not only now been cited as an official source on Wikipedia, but that it's kind of been considered the primary source, well, I guess by necessity the secondary source, but one of the main places people will go to find information about it, because it's got, unlike other primary sources, it has all the information in one place. I find myself cross-referencing it because it really speaks to, and this is a point you make in the video, it speaks to so many aspects of what makes the Touhou community really amazing. So much creative talent, so much people picking up where other people left off, so much collaboration, and spanning over such a huge amount of time. I believe you made a point something along the lines of, this couldn't have been done in any other online community. This is something unique to Touhou. So I think that's really interesting, and it really makes for an interesting video. Even by the thumbnail and title alone, I was like, oh yeah, I've got to watch this video. It was absolutely incredible, and I definitely can see as how it's propelled your channel to this point.
Yeah, thanks. One weird thing I do want to touch on, though, is because I think it's cited on Wikipedia twice. Once for history, which is fair, but then the other thing is for, like, my analysis of the lyrics, which I don't exactly get, since that seems subjective.
I mean, it's a good analysis.
No, thank you. Yeah, I just find it weird because it's like, it seems like everything else on that article is about, like, objective things, and that's just, oh, this song is about this because this random guy on YouTube said so.
I mean, hey, if you're gonna throw out something that's subjective, you might as well cite a source.
I guess that's fair.
So what sort of sources and tools do you use when creating your videos, when researching initial topics, when getting preliminary resources? Do you often utilize the English Touhou Wiki? Are there other websites that you find very useful for this?
English Touhou Wiki is, like, my life force. Like, that is essentially, if I ever need a source, I'm on the English Touhou Wiki. It has so much stuff on it. Like, the Bad Apple video, like, all the links, like, oh, the original upload of Bad Apple would be here, or, yeah, the stuff about, like, some of the history, like, that's on the English Touhou Wiki. Like, a lot of, yeah, my sourcing is from there, but then also, a lot of my script is just, like, my opinion, like, at my video Touhou Where to Start, and in it, I think I recommend, like, 3 different Touhou fan games, and, yeah, none of that is, like, sourced at all. That's just me talking about my experiences with them. So, in general, it's usually mainly the Touhou Wiki, but then also just my thoughts, which might seem weird for, like, a video essay, or, like, factual video essays, yeah, but a lot of it is just what I think of something rather than, like, me trying to back it up with data.
Right, yeah, and I think that kind of essay is often overlooked. And this is something I learned a lot about in my composition classes, that a lot of people, when they think about essays, they just think expository essays, where I'm just going to open up this topic and I'm just going to talk about it completely objectively with no opinions. But that's only one of many kinds of essays, and there are a lot of kind of opinionated essays that are considered academic. So I don't think it's necessarily wrong or should be looked down upon for making a video essay that is full of your opinions. I think it's more important that you put your opinion out there and you back it up with source material, especially if you're going to be talking about things like, if you're just giving sort of your opinions on a fan game, you don't really need to cite anything. You can just say, okay, this happens in the game. If you don't believe me, go play the game. But on other things, like if you're maybe reviewing a specific topic in the Touhou franchise, I think it's really important to have a source material to back. And that's why English Touhou Wiki, and by the way, I mean the touhouwiki.net, obviously, not the fandom.com wiki.
Yeah, not fandom.
Don't use the fandom.com wiki, please.
I remember, I think it was someone was trying to, like, say that the characters had confirmed ages, and their source was that, and I'm like,
yeah.
Can you find anything else? And they couldn't.
Yeah, no, it's... people use that to talk about characters' confirmed ages, confirmed heights. It's terrible. In the English touhouwiki.net, it has its own problems. A lot of the things it's really good at is the same thing that Wikipedia is really good at, in that a lot of times it'll say something that you're like, that doesn't really sound right. But it has a link to where you can go to the source material, and then you're like, oh, okay, that is right, or that is not right. So it's really good for finding specific things. Like, I remember I once had a comment asking, like, whoa, do you have a source for saying that Renosuke knows about the Hakurei God? And I'm like, yeah, here on the Touhou wiki, it has literally the page name and everything. It's like, it's right there. So it's really good for finding those sources, but there are sometimes you'll just find things on there that's like, I don't know about that. Like, I remember reading through the wiki for the article for Kogasa. There's just this line that says that one time she tried out a babysitting business, and I started to feel like I was going insane because I have no idea where that's from. I checked through all of her dialogue in every game she's been in. I checked there were no sources cited for this. I checked through all the print works that she's appeared in. I tried just researching keywords in English and Japanese for babysitting, business, anything with Kogasa. I feel like I'm going insane because I read this one line on English Touhou Wiki that said, yep, she tried a babysitting business, and I have no idea where that's from.
And it always seems to be, if that wiki's wrong, it's usually in the character backstory sections for some weird reason.
Yeah!
It's those are always more wrong than anything else on that wiki if there is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's a well-known fact that there was an entire 2 years that Marissa's backstory page said she ran away from home to avoid an arranged marriage. That was on the Touhou Wiki for 2 years.
Oh, and I actually know another big issue, and I don't know how well known this is, but there's this really weird guy who gave a really broken translation of the Touhou derivative work guidelines on the wiki, and it was just up there for 2 years or something.
Really?
Yeah. And especially for stuff like that, because you have people commercially releasing fan games based on the wiki, so making sure that's right is really important.
Yeah. So I try not to just rip my opinions directly off the wiki. I'm gonna check on that. There were definitely a few details when I was researching my cosmology video. There were a few details on some locations that I omitted just because I could not reliably find a source for them. This especially happens with PC98 because PC98 kind of has a lot of empty gaps in the lore. So a lot of it kind of has to be filled in by logic or comparing it to a real-world mythology. But then you get a lot of people who just go by memory oh, it's like this. But their memory is muddled by a fan work. So you get a lot of that, and I have no issues with the staff of the English Touhou Wiki. In fact, I would totally be willing to have some of them on the podcast. I think that'd be fantastic. But you just definitely want to keep that in mind if you're doing Touhou analysis content, that you can't just read off the wiki. You really gotta go to the sources. And that's something it's really good for, is check your sources.
You know the weirdest thing about the PC98 era, though?
Oh, what's that?
It's that in the manual for Embodiment of the Scarlet Devil, it says Embodiment of the Scarlet Devil only happens a few months after Mystic Square, which under any context makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, no, that doesn't make sense at all. I mean, most of the Touhou games pretty much, they occur in the year that the game demo is first released. So to have it just a few months apart, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And as well, the differences between the characters in that time span. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah, because I think it's because 17 or 7.5 comes out 2 years later. By then the characters are drinking. I think in Touhou 4 it says Marissa's 8 or something.
I mean, that would make sense, if following the timeline as well. But I think it's also important to remember that the sort of year-by-year timeline that was established for the Windows canon hadn't really been set up by PC98. And of course, there's questions of how canon is PC98. Are parts of it canon? Is all of it canon? I'm generally of the opinion that unless things in PC98 show up in later games or works, that they usually aren't. But again, Zune kind of goes back and forth on this. I generally try to stick to a statement he made in one of his emails, I think in 2007 or 6. in one of Zun's newsletter emails, somebody asked him about the canonicity of PC98, and the statement he said was essentially, consider them to be as canon as fan works, being that they're still in the world of Gensokyo, characters are still there, but like, you don't need to like set a hard line on this is canon or this isn't, just consider it like you would a derivative work. So it's still up in the air, I think, but, you know. So it seems like your shift towards educational videos, and more specifically Touhou videos, has really propelled your channel to be what it is today. About even less than a year ago, you put out a video celebrating 100 subscribers, and then less than 3 months after that, you followed up with a video celebrating 2,000 subscribers. So that kind of growth for a fandom channel is astounding. What kind of changes do you think advanced your channel so far forward in those early months of 2021?
So in the early months of 2021, at that point, Bad Apple Explained was still new, so it was getting recommended to a lot of people to the point where, like, I think it was, like, getting 6,000 views a day. So then, from there, it was, okay, this is doing really good, but what do people watching Bad Apple Explain want to see next? And then I realized a lot of people get into Touhou from Bad Apple, but in my opinion, there wasn't really, like, a solid way to figure out where to start with Touhou. Like, you had this really great video, I forget who made it, but there's a really good video on, like, the difficulties of every Touhou game, which is the easiest, which is the hardest, but there wasn't, like, a straight video telling you, like, oh, if you want to get into Touhou, this is the game you should start with. So, from there, I made Touhou Where to Start, and then, as a supplement to that, I'm like, oh, and then maybe people want a summary of Touhou, I made my Touhou Explained in 2 minutes or less. So that ended up forming my Touhou Starter Guide, which in a sense was essentially in response to Bad Apple Explained, because people would watch that, they'd want to get into Touhou, and then I could be like, oh, I have videos for getting into Touhou if you want to watch them. So then they'd watch that, they'd like the videos, and they'd end up subscribing. So it was a plan, like, I'm really happy it worked out as well as it did, because I guess I just have this thing where whenever I have a plan, like, I usually expect it to essentially go exactly how I think it will, and in that case, it actually did. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, the optimism is definitely there, and it worked out really well. So that's a really solid plan for growing your channel, and also just, it's nice to see people that have been into Touhou for an amount of time to remember that people are still getting into it, and that it's kind of having a, you know, I hesitate to say a second wave, because at this point it's like an 8th or 9th wave in the West. But yeah, it's having another big resurgence with a lot of new fans that are getting into things. I've seen a lot of comments on my videos that are like, wow, I'm just getting into Touhou, this is great. And a couple other people, you know, will sometimes say things like, oh, I'm new to Touhou, where do I start? And a lot of them will like say that on either my iceberg video or my cosmology video. I'm like, don't start here. Go to Megapig's channel, watch his video, go to Asprey FM's channel, check out his guides. That's where you want to start. You don't want to start with like the deep, in-depth lore of the world and all that. That's maybe a little later. All right, so one of the more unique aspects of your channel is your promotion of Touhou fan games. You've been involved in some of the Touhou game jams of the past 2 years, and you often review and showcase the games you've played on your own channel. Are there any games you wish to review in the future that you haven't been able to look over yet?
Right before recording this podcast, actually, I was playing Kubanashi Recollection, which is the Sekibaki puzzle game that came out, like, last Christmas. And, like, as a puzzle game, it's really fun, and the fact it stars Sekibaki on its own is cool. But what's really drawing me in is the writing is inexplicably really, really good.
Oh, really?
Which seems to be a common theme for Touhou fan games, because it's like, the writing there is good, the writing in Spell Bubble is good, the writing in Touhou Lost Word of all things is sometimes really good in the main story, so it's like, it's just, I play fan games, and whenever, like, because this isn't a story-based game, it's a puzzle game, but just the fact that the writing is so on character and so, like, full of optimism and, like, love for the world, like, it's really charming, so that's a fan game I really want to cover. And then the other one I want to cover is this fan game called Rain Project. And this one has a really interesting story because it was actually developed by a team of high schoolers in the West during their senior year. And like the main developer of it has this really great blog post going over like making the game. But it was like, in my mind, this is really the first true like Touhou fan game in the West to get like a major release on Steam. So I want to cover that because I think the developer story is really interesting, but I think it also goes over the fact that yes, you can make a Touhou fan game in the West and it can succeed.
Absolutely, yeah, that'd be really interesting to see. I'll have to make sure and check that out myself. So, do you have any other big videos in the works right now that you can talk about?
I have plans, which is a weird thing, but essentially, and this is an open invitation to any other content creators listening, there are two extremely big anniversaries for Touhou this year. On May 20th, 2022, Bad Apple, the Nomiko version, turns 15 years old. I have ideas of what I'm going to do, but nothing like completely set in stone. But what essentially happened last year was during Cyrano Day, a ton of Touhou content creators uploaded a bunch of content, and then it all kept getting recommended to everyone, so there's just infinite like loop of growth throughout the entire community. So I think having another day like that would be really cool, and also it's like Bad Apple would be fun to celebrate. And then the other big anniversary, and arguably one of the most important, is August 11th, 2022, is the 20th anniversary of Embodiment of the Scarlet Devil.
Wow.
Which is a huge deal. So, yeah, I want to try to organize, like, a day for content creators to do stuff then, too. But also, I have my friends on the Touhou Fan Game Dev Hub. Yeah, some of them are planning to, like, release, like, mini fan games when that comes out. So, I'm expecting, like, the fan art people to already be doing stuff for Touhou 6, but I just think coordinating, like, the entire community to do, like, this entire celebration for Touhou 6 would be really cool. And actually, there is one video that I've been planning, and the reason I haven't published it is kind of silly, but October 1st is, like, this huge Touhou and TF2 meme.
October 1st, yeah. Yeah, I heard it in my head as soon as you said it.
I have a ton of research for the video, and I was originally going to release it this year, and it's like, if I put in the effort, I probably could. The only reason I haven't actually started recording or editing the video is because I missed the upload date for October 1st, just waiting till October 1st, 2022, and that's when that video is going to come out.
Right.
So yeah, those are my main future plans.
And I'll definitely have to make sure and put a reminder in for later in the year to do something for that 20th anniversary, and damn it, I feel old. Alright, so, to my understanding, you have quite a history with game development. You've mentioned that you're currently studying the subject in a university, and you're also making a lot of works on your personal time as well. How did you get your start in this kind of industry?
Of all the people to think, it's my mom's my mom's coworker, because, yeah, I'm in a Chinese-Japanese family, so we did the stereotypical, he should try piano, he should try sports, he should try this. But then my mom's coworker was like, why don't you have him try something like he likes and see what happens? So then my mom signed me up for this game development class in 3rd grade, and yeah, I loved it. I took the class 2 more times, and I just kept making games and kept making them. The issue is, to make a good game takes a really, really long time. So even though I started in 3rd grade, I didn't really have anything substantial until 8th grade. And then this is where I think my path differs from other people. But whenever people are getting into game development, I always tell them to start with modding games, because that's how I started. Making an entire new game from scratch is really hard, but then if you mod a game, you only have to change values, so it's way easier to make new content, but while you're doing that, you also get to see someone's code. So then, from seeing someone's code, it can help you learn how to make your own. So, I made this mod for a Mario fan game that did pretty well. That was the most successful thing on my channel until, my Bad Apple Explained video. So I essentially worked on that mod for, I think, 4 years. And then it got to the point where, okay, I think I'm ready. I want to try to make my own original games now. So then I found the Touhou fan game jams, and the reason I stuck around are because that community is like my favorite place on the internet. Like the Touhou fan community is so big and wide. A lot of people say they don't fit in. The truth is, you essentially have to find your niche. It's a really long search. It took me like a year and a half, but I finally found my community with them. So from there, not only did I have a ton of new friends, but I also had a place where I could keep making fan games. My first real Touhou fan game was like this hybrid between Touhou 1 and Touhou 3. It was like a versus breakout game with dot and Maku elements, and like that was really cool. So then I kept making them, and eventually I hit like my highest point, which was a visual novel called Dance of the Inverted Heart,
Right, it's
which
a good
stars Seija and Shinomaru. That was made in 2 weeks and is somehow a 40-minute long visual novel with 6 mini games, like 10 different locations, like 10 characters, and then every single mini game has a different composer because I wanted to work with every composer I'd ever worked with at that point to like say my thanks to the community.
Right, it's impressive.
Yeah, and from there, we managed to put it together. Like, I was sick the day after, but it was totally worth it because it's a game I'm so proud of. And then that's also kind of what taught me, like, even though I'm not the strongest programmer, I think I'm really good at directing games because I had to organize, like, all the art, all the music, all the sound effects, and then also, like, it's a visual novel. The writing came hand in hand, so that kind of set me on the path of where I am now. Yeah, I had a few more fan games. My most recent fan game was one starring Renko. That one was a ton of fun just because Renko was a really fun character to write. Like, I think Zune said in the past that Sine is the easiest character for him to write. For me, it's Renko just because her personality is so outgoing. Yeah, so that was nice. And then I'm currently working on. It's funny, this one was essentially made as a joke, and then it turned serious, because I have a friend who runs my college game development club, and he was like, oh, we don't have enough projects, so I was like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if I submitted a pitch for a Touhou fan game? And then miraculously, it actually got picked up,
Amazing.
and I was able to pitch it under the idea of, oh, all the games like other people pitched are original, this one lets you work with an existing IP, which you're going to be doing in the industry. So, yeah, I'm making a Touhou fan game as a college project.
Right.
It's called Sumireko Touhou Time Twister. It stars Sumireko, and just the fact that I'm able to do that is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, all Touhou fans do have an unofficial quota. It's an unspoken rule that you have to put out so much Touhou propaganda to the outside world. You know, it's a per month thing. Like, oh man, I haven't mentioned offhandedly Touhou to somebody. Oh, I haven't made a slight Touhou reference here and there. It's definitely something that's a lot of fun for Touhou fans to do, and it's always fun to see it actually pick up. You know, you get to see your friends work on this thing. You get to be a part of it. So what has your experience been like working for game jams? Because I'm an outsider to this process, but I would imagine a game jam to be really stressful and really time crunchy. What is it like to make a game for a game jam, and what are some of the limitations you face when developing a game for a jam?
Game jams, it's kind of weird because my first game jam miraculously wasn't that stressful. Mainly because I had an artist, her name's DJ Thunderheart, who works so fast that anything I asked for, she would get me on time. To the point that we had so much extra time, she drew me an extra character without telling me. So then I had this extra content to implement like 3 hours before, and it still worked. So that was nice, but yeah, a lot of the times it isn't that smooth. Like, for one game jam, a current friend, then he was a new person I was working with, came up with this idea of, oh, we should do a rhythm game where you're dodging the notes at the same time. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. programming that was an absolute nightmare, and it barely works. The fact that it's even running is a miracle because it's based on the computer's timer rather than delta timing, and the program just happens to be, like, so resourceful that it doesn't, like, lag. Like, if it lagged at all, this game would not work at all. So, yeah, that was a lot of me getting 4-hour, like, nights of sleep. But that also taught me something, which was I need to make sure that when I make a game, I'm able to have a proper scope. Well, of course, there is one exception, which was I put my heart and soul into Dance of the Inverted Heart because that was a game I really wanted to make. But after that, all of my games have been based around the idea of, like, making sure that everyone gets enough time for proper sleep. So, for example, my most recent game, it was a visual novel. It was 10 minutes long, but all the assets were actually finished 12 hours before the deadline. Like, I didn't even need to test it that much, it was just done. And a large part of that was me figuring out, like, from previous jams, how much time I would have to do stuff. Like, making the actual, like, visual novel text, that doesn't really take that long. It would be the art assets and the mini games that I need to watch out for. So, a large part of doing game jams is essentially the more and more you do them, the less stressful it becomes because you get better at managing time, and you also learn how to work with your team better if you work with a constant team like I do.
Yeah, I can definitely see the benefits of sort of building up a long-term team like that. All right, so your analysis videos cover many aspects of the Touhou project, covering the games, the print works, and even the music CDs and even other aspects. What are the parts of Touhou, the mediums of Touhou, I suppose, that have brought you the most enjoyment?
That's a good question. Does it have to stay within the bounds of official Touhou media?
I think for this question, we'll say yeah. For official Touhou, do you prefer the games, the print works, the CDs? What else stands out the most to you?
Probably the characters mainly, because, like, there's so many characters, and Touhou's kind of like Fire Emblem and Puyo Puyo in a way, where it's like, there's so many characters that almost everyone has a different favorite character, which I think is really cool. So, yeah, getting to know all the characters is good, because, like, if you ask me what my favorite Touhou character is, I'd have, like, 5 different answers, because that's how appealing the cast is. So, I think, yeah, just the fact that there's this giant world full of all of these characters who get, like, development in various types of different works is cool. But then, also there's something I want to say, I don't know why, but it's like, I feel like there's this weird thing where it's, you either, like, you're super into the Touhou games, like, you go for high scores and stuff, or you're not, and, like, I'm kind of in the middle, because, like, I think within the time, like, within, like, this year, I 1cc'd 2 Touhou games on normal, so it's like, I play the games and understand them and enjoy them, it's just, I tend to prefer the other stuff more, but that doesn't mean, like, I don't like the games.
Right, yeah, and I kind of fall into the same category of, yeah, I like the games, they're fun, but I'm also really bad at bullet hell games. I got into Touhou for the music, so I think there's definitely a lot to experience outside of just the games. You also did, happen to guess my next question, which is, do you have a favorite character? If so, what makes them stand out from the rest of the cast?
Yeah. Okay, I'm not gonna say 5. I will say 3, however. Okay, so, first off, like, Raiko, I like Raiko a lot because her entire, like, motivation is just, I love being alive so much. So, she just spends her time in Gensokyo doing what she loves, which is playing music, and that happens to make her friends, and then also, yeah, she ends up being popular. And then she's also, like, trying to make sure that, like, tools can live happily. So, yeah, I think Raiko is, like, really cool. I like her. And then, secondly, there's Sumireko, who I absolutely adore. From her introduction, she is a reversal of the isekai, because in an isekai, it's a character from our world going into their world as the protagonist. In Touhou 14.5, Sumireko pulls characters from Gensokyo into our world, and she's the main antagonist. It's like a complete reversal. But then also just her going to Gensokyo and finally making friends, and then all of the stuff around her, like, she essentially rebooted Curiosities of Lotus Asia. Like, I love Sumireko and all of the storytelling potential she has brought, and she is still bringing. But then, my ultimate favorite character is Satori, just mainly because of the angst that comes with being able to read everyone's minds and being shunned for it. And, like, canon does a lot of good stuff with it. Like, her liking books because you can't read their mind, that's in canon, and there's a ton of other stuff like that. So, yeah, Satori's really interesting to me. And, yeah. So I guess Reiko's, like, my favorite. Like, I like Reiko's archetype a lot, and then Sumireko I love for what she represents and the story she can tell. And then I guess Satori is kind of a mix of both of those.
The way I like to organize my favorite characters is kind of the same way I do with Pokemon, is that you've got your coolest and your cutest, you know? Like, I would definitely say that those are two different characters for me. There are definitely characters that, you know, are just very appealing based on their character or their design, but they're also characters that you look at and think, wow, there's a lot of story potential there. So it's always nice to have a couple of different characters that you like for a lot of different reasons. You seem to have purchased merchandise of a couple of different game franchises that are near and dear to you, but have you purchased any Touhou merchandise, official or otherwise?
Yes. The first thing I purchased, which is actually another video I will make someday, but do you know about the UFO-typical Touhou anime?
I do. I covered it in my iceberg video.
Yeah, so the art book of that anime is surprisingly cheap. It's only $40, so...
Can you still get it? I thought it was out of stock.
It was out of stock. I don't know. When I bought it, there were 2 left in stock, and it was only $40, so it's like,
wow.
I better get this before it's gone, in case I want to make a video on it. So,
oh man, I wish I'd known about that.
Now I have that art book, and yeah, it's really cool. And I want to scan it and upload it online, because it is lost media. The issue is I don't know, like, the legality of it, so...
I mean...
I'll get to the wiki one day.
Yeah. You know, legality at this point has to go a little bit out the window when it comes to preserving lost media. Like, it's something you want to keep in mind, obviously, but
yeah,
it's like, I mean, I think it would be worth it to upload it, but maybe don't upload it straight to the wiki or anything tied to your name. Maybe just sneak it onto Dynasty scans or something.
Yeah, get a proxy. SuperDuck 8002 will be uploading this.
Oh, fun fact for you as well. Senor Palo also owns that art book.
Oh, nice. Then, one of the other things was, I was just in a used book and CD store one day, and I see a Touhou CD, and I'm like, I'm probably never going to get a chance to buy physical Touhou media in the US ever again. So I,
wow, really?
bought that instantly. Yeah. As I said, I love Sumireko, so I picked up a copy of Grimoire of Asami. And then, when I was researching for my fan game, I picked up a copy of Touhou 14.5 legally, because trying to get it through the PS4 store is kind of complicated, and I don't actually own a PS4, that's my roommate's. But then the big one was this giant collab CD that came out over the summer called Touhou Sound Fireworks that was organized by Beat Mario. It has over 40 songs on it. You can listen to it on Spotify now, but back then, there was no way to, like, digitally... There technically still isn't a way to digitally own it, you can only stream it. But, like, I'm like, I really want this CD. So I ended up paying for it, but then shipping's a nightmare, so the shipping was, like, $40, I think. So I think I ended up spending $80 for this CD with 40 songs. And the weird thing is, I'd still say it's totally worth it, because I listen to, like, the songs on my phone all the time. So of, like, all the Touhou merchandise I own, that's probably my favorite.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely seems worth a purchase. Maybe I'll have to look into that. Alright, so to round things off, I do have a handful of questions from our very own lovely Hifuu community. So, Not Quite Here asks... Hey, that was a guy on our show. Hey, Not Quite Here asks, throughout various Touhou fan works, are there any soundtracks that really stuck with you in a specific way? If so, how exactly do they remain memorable?
Well, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think anyone who knows, the final boss of Touhou Luna Nights has one of the coolest, like, surprise song choices ever. Again, I won't spoil it, but if you've played the game, you know what I'm talking about. And then also, I love Osana Reimu and Rei Reimu, and the final song of that like story being a Liz Triangle piano combination of Reimu and Rumia's themes. It's like heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time. It's so emotional. Like in terms of Touhou fan works, like that's probably the moment for a soundtrack I remember the most.
Yeah, Osana Reimu is really one of those fan works that sticks out. If perchance you are listening to this and haven't watched Osana Reimu, please do yourself a favor and check it out on YouTube. I'll have a link to it in the video description. It's one of those really standout ones because there aren't a lot of Touhou animatics that really stuck in my mind. There's a handful, and there's some really good ones out there, but not a lot that stuck with me for that long. But Osana Reimu, even as long as it is, just imprinted itself on my brain. It's so good. All right, so Rook asks, what got you into Touhou? We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but anything else to add in your early experiences with the project?
Yeah, Bad Apple got me into it. There's a Switch fan game called Azure Reflections that goes through Touhou 6 and introduces characters from other games. Yeah, that got me kind of invested on the gameplay and introduced me to Nitori and Totori, which were the first characters I really liked. And then Osana Reimu was kind of the point where I'm like, oh, so this is why everyone loves Touhou. And importantly, it was also the point where I don't think I'd written anything outside of like school for like the past 2 years, but it's like, this story is really good. I want to try writing my own stories again. So yeah, I'd say Bad Apple, Touhou Azure Reflections, and Osana Reimu were the 3 big things that got me into Touhou.
All pretty solid choices, I must say. So Gatomon20XX asks, do you have a personal favorite Touhou fan-made creation? What about it makes it special to you?
I've answered this 3 times in a row now, which is pretty funny. But yeah, Osana Reimu. And then, I guess since I talked about Osana Reimu, I like Rei Reimu a lot, which is the sequel series, because while Osana Reimu is a really good standalone story, Rei Reimu feels like a character study of why Reimu acts the way she does, like why she makes the spell card rules. So I love both Osana Reimu and Rei Reimu, but for, I guess, slightly different reasons.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out myself because I haven't checked out Rei Reimu, but I've heard good things about it. So, Tab and Dan, I think, asks, what do you think about the Touhou fandom and the people who consider themselves fans but didn't experience the canon games?
Okay, this is a weird question to answer. So, I think in the same way that you can be a football fan without literally playing football, you can be a Touhou fan without playing the games. Like, it's not that deep. If you like any part of Touhou, you're a fan of it. But there is something where I think you do need experience, like, with Touhou works in order to do it right, which is writing. I have some game dev friends who say that you can write a story for a game, for like a Touhou fan game, without doing research, and I will respectfully disagree. I think if you really want a Touhou story to work, you need to understand why the audience you're making it for likes the characters. So that's where I say you need to look into canon, but if you're just a casual enjoyer of the series, I think that's completely fine. As for the fandom itself, I think I touched on this before, but it's very segmented, so it's kind of hard to evaluate as this giant entity. But if you feel like you don't fit in, you need to keep looking, and I promise you there will be somewhere that you will definitely fit in, but it takes a long, long, long time to find it.
Yeah, it's definitely not a monolithic entity. There's a lot to criticize about individual parts and portions. There are some that are really great. There are some that are really not. But you can definitely find your niche. I mean, I wouldn't have considered myself part of the fandom until maybe 2 years ago. But I had known about Touhou, and I had liked Touhou since 2012. That's when I found the music, and I had known about the music for years. Before I had even touched a single game, which, yes, the first one I started out with was Touhou 6. But before I had even... I mean, I went on Google, I typed in best way to start with Touhou. And, obviously this was years before your video was to come out, but I just found, I think it was a Reddit thread that was like, yeah, start with Touhou 6. And I'm like, sure, I'll try it out. And I played it, and I didn't like it, so I didn't play any of the other games. But I still wanted to try it out. So I just started Googling Touhou, and I was like, oh, it's a multimedia project. It's not just a game series. Maybe I'll try the other stuff. And that's around when I started picking up Wild and Horned Hermit, and I was like, wow, I'm gonna love this. So I think, and again, I would have considered myself a fan of Touhou since 2012, but I hadn't touched any of the games till 2015. And that was, around the time that, I think that was when Legacy of Lunatic Kingdom was in its trial. I think so. But again, I think there's a lot to experience, still consider yourself a fan. And in truth, I think even casual fans are alright to just experience the fan works and the fan art because there's, again, a lot to like about it. So if you just like the music, if you just like the fan works, I think you can still consider yourself a Touhou fan with massive air quotes because truth is, I mean, who made us John Touhou, CEO of Touhou? We're not here to decide who gets to be a fan, who doesn't. I feel like there's a bit of elitism around that. But I mean, yeah, if you like Touhou, you should try the games. If you don't like the games, then you don't like them. I think there's a lot else to experience with Touhou, and that's why it's so easy to get into. There's so much to like. All right, so I think that is about all the time we have for today. But before we take it out, Megapig, do you want to tell the listeners where they can find your content?
Yeah, so my channel is Megapig9001, not related to Megafrog in any way. Yeah, so you can find my channel just on YouTube by searching it, and I assume there's going to be a link. I hope there is.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Anything you mention here, I will put a link to.
Just click that link and, yeah, have fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been a real treat to have you on. We will be back on March 1st with a new featured creator, so until then, please wait warmly. The intro theme to the Hifuu Community Club is Aquasphere by Mondorium. There's a link to their official YouTube channel in the video description. Always remember to please, please, please treat the artists in the Touhou community with respect. They do so much for us, so remember to credit art and music, and remember that you can always support artists through commissions, prints, views, shares, and album downloads. So thank you for tuning in to the Hifuu Community Club, and to all, have a pleasant evening.